Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into a landmark legal case that really put freedom of the press on trial. And it all started with one single explosive TV episode that challenged the very limits of government censorship. So, let's set the scene. The date is October 15, 1991. One television broadcast is about to air, and it's going to set off a legal firestorm that will burn for years. The show was called The Inside Story, a public affairs program hosted by Lauren Lagarda on the ABS-CBN network. And the title of this particular episode? Prostitution. Yeah, they went there. Now, this wasn't just some abstract report. The show had candid interviews with everybody, students, customers, even some faculty members. But here's the part that really caused an explosion. It explicitly named the Philippine Women's University and even showed its building, which, as you can imagine, sparked an immediate and massive uproar. So, after that broadcast, you can bet the university community didn't just stay quiet. Their complaints brought a really powerful government agency into the mix, and that's when the fight officially began. The Philippine Women's University, along with its Parents and Teachers Association, went and filed formal complaints directly with the Movie and Television Review and Classification Board. You probably know them as the MTRCB. Their argument was pretty straightforward. The show had seriously damaged the university's reputation. Okay, so the MTRCB's legal team jumps in with a formal complaint of their own. But here's the interesting part. Their complaint wasn't actually about whether the episode was true or not. Nope, it was all about procedure. They claimed ABS-CBN broke the law by not submitting the show for review before it went on the air. And this is where you can really see the two sides digging in. On one hand, you've got ABS-CBN saying, hey, this is a public affairs program, it's journalism, it's protected by freedom of the press, so you guys at the MTRCB have no say here. But on the other hand, the MTRCB is standing firm, basically saying, look, the law is the law. It says you have to submit all TV programs for review, and you didn't. So, did the MTCRB's investigating committee buy ABS-CBN's argument? Nope, not at all. They sided with the government and slapped the network with a 20,000 peso fine for not submitting the program. But honestly, the fine wasn't even the biggest deal. The real bombshell was the MTRCB's next move. They ordered that all future episodes of The Inside Story had to be reviewed before they could be aired. This is what lawyers call prior restraint, and that order is what turned a simple fine into this huge constitutional battle over censorship. But ABS-CBN wasn't just going to roll over and accept this. They took the fight to court. Their argument? That the MTRCB's demand for prior review was basically just unconstitutional government censorship. So the network's legal argument was actually pretty powerful. They said that a public affairs show is a key part of a free press. And just like a newspaper doesn't need a government stamp of approval before it can be printed, well, a news documentary shouldn't need a government board's permission before it can be shown to the public. Makes sense, right? And you know what? At first, it looked like a massive win for the network. The lower court completely sided with ABS-CBN. It was a huge victory for the broadcaster, and, it seemed, for press freedom in the Philippines. The court's logic was super clear. It basically said, look, a show like The Inside Story is pretty much the same thing as a newspaper, and because of that, it's outside the MTRCB's jurisdiction. Simple as that. The board's decision was officially tossed out. But this thing was far from over. The MTRCB was not ready to throw in the towel. They appealed the decision, pushing the case all the way up to the Supreme Court for what would be the final, definitive ruling. So, this was it. The final showdown. The Supreme Court had to answer this one fundamental question. Does the MTRCB's power actually extend to news and public affairs shows? And believe me, the answer was going to have huge consequences for all television broadcasting from that point on. Now, believe it or not, this entire super complex legal battle, it all came down to how you interpret one tiny three-letter word in the law that created the MTRCB in the first place. The law in question, Presidential Decree 1986, is right at the center of this. It gives the MTRCB the power to screen, review, and examine, and here's the keyword, all television programs. And the MTRCB's whole argument pretty much hung on that single word. All means all. And that, right there, was the core of ABS-CBN's comeback. They argued, come on, surely the people who wrote this law didn't mean for the word all to include content that's protected by the Constitution's guarantee of a free press. They were essentially saying there had to be an unspoken exception. But here's the thing, the Supreme Court had a really powerful precedent it could point to. In a past case involving the religious group Iglesia ni Cristo, the court had already decided that even their religious programs had to be reviewed by the MTRCB. And the logic was airtight. Freedom of religion actually has a preferred status in the Constitution, even higher than freedom of the press. So if even those highly protected religious shows weren't exempt, how could a news show possibly be exempt? So, in a kind of a last-ditch effort, ABS-CBN tried one more angle. They argued that the inside story should be classified as a newsreel. This was a pretty clever move, because newsreels are one of the very few things explicitly exempt from MTRCB review. But the court? Yeah, they shot that down pretty quickly. They pointed out that a newsreel is just straight reporting of facts. The inside story, on the other hand, was a public affairs show full of analysis, opinions, and commentary. It just didn't fit the definition, not even close. And with that, all of ABS-CBN's arguments were off the table. The Supreme Court was ready to deliver a landmark verdict, one that would cement the MTRCB's power and totally shape the landscape of Philippine television for decades. So let's just walk through the Supreme Court's final logic here, step by step. 1. The law says the MTRCB can review all TV programs. 2. All means all. There are no exceptions listed for news documentaries. 3. They already decided this in the Iglesia ni Cristo case. 4. The inside story is not a newsreel, and therefore, 5. The conclusion was inevitable. The Supreme Court reversed the lower court's decision and affirmed the MTRCB's original ruling. The government board had the power to review all TV programs, including public affairs shows, before they aired. So, in the end, this case settled a really important legal question about the MTRCB's authority. But it leaves us with a much bigger, more philosophical question that people still debate today. Where do you draw the line between a government protecting public standards and a government controlling the free press?